Hello, I'm Ann Casner, and I'm here welcoming you into my home as I share with you a few stories about homes and about families. So my first story is about my maternal grandfather. He grew up in Somerville, Massachusetts, and raised my mother in Newton, Mass. They had a small farmhouse right on the corner of Beacon Street and Hammond Pond Parkway. Some of the days my mother would need me to have something to do while she had something to do. And she would drop me off at my grandfather's house and I would spend the day with him. And I was maybe 8, 9, or 10. And he had a nice vegetable garden. And what I did one day was go out to the vegetable garden and pull out of the ground some not fully grown carrots. Tiny little slivers of skinny carrots. Took them inside and rinsed them off and bit into them and found them to be so delectably sweet. And no store-bought carrot ever tasted this way. So I started thinking, well, I should have a vegetable garden when I get my own house. And sure enough, gardening became part of my life. And it evolved from growing a few tomato plants to a full, very colorful perennial garden. And my perennial garden was actually given to me by many of my mother's friends. They were all gardeners, and since I lived close by to them in Wellesley, Mass, they would drop off clumps of plants that they had pulled up from their garden and shared them with me. And when I planted them, they flourished, and I was told that now my garden is a friendship garden. And a friendship garden is one that every spring it comes up, and while you're out tending to your garden and pulling off the leaves and the dried out brush that's the winter brush, that it uncovers the people who gave you these plants and helps you to think about them. So all of your friends are in the garden, and it's a friendship garden. And sure enough, all of the fun times that I had spent with my mother's friends, lunches and cookie parties and garden tours, would come to mind every spring as I uncovered these beautiful plants that would bring me joy and color every year. And then started my gardening experience, and my backyard, which was once a blank slate, became a very full, lush, beautiful garden. And it all started at my grandfather's house in Newton. He had geraniums and a few other plants that he would bring in during the winter months. And I got to water them every time that I was there, being taken care of by my grandfather. And I loved the way that my grandfather's calm demeanor was very peaceful and fun to be around, because we weren't always having to do something. We would play cards and we'd sit and read, and I would play in the garden. And so So he taught me that sometimes you don't have to say words, and you can still have build fond memories and have a nice time and find some enjoyment in the quiet time. So his house was a farmhouse, as I mentioned, in Newton. And when he died in 1974, my parents had to sell the house, and I helped my mother prepare the house and get all of the stuff boxed up and moved out before the realtors came in and took photographs of it and marketed it. Well, it went under agreement after being on the market for only 8 days, and that was a big surprise to my parents. And actually, they had a little conversation about maybe we priced it too low. Yet at that point, the buyer purchased it at the asking price. And I asked my parents about the purchaser, and my mother said, well, it's a couple. And I said, oh, okay. Do they have any children? Nope, no children. It's just a man and a woman, and they live together. And I thought, a man and a woman living together? You mean they're not married? And my mother said, no, they're not married. They have 2 different names. And I thought that was an unheard of and unthinkable experience. And as I became a little wiser to the world, I learned that that was a real thing and it was happening. So the gentleman actually built a name for himself and started a television show. And you may know of the television show, the PBS, very popular one, all about houses, called This Old House. So Bob Vila was the buyer of my mother's father's house, and he was doing a testing of all of the local contractors and plumbers and electricians. So he sort of honed his trade prior to creating This Old House with my mother's house. And at the end of his renovations, we got to tour the house, and he had done a spectacular job of taking an old, dark, dusty farmhouse and created this beautiful, contemporary, crystal clean, beautiful house with so many beautiful updates that we had never ever seen anything like this. And this was just a taste of what was to come in his television shows. Every week he would come into our house and show these wonderful renovations of old farmhouses and barns and just historic homes all throughout New England. And there it was, a little farmhouse on, we'll call it an expanded farmhouse after he was finished with it, in Newton, Massachusetts. So that only was a taste of history for me that I was able to take with me and create my own business now, which is in real estate, residential real estate, as I'm a realtor with Gibson Sotheby's International Realty. So I help buyers and sellers with their homes, and it's really been a wonderful experience for me, connecting with all of these families and being in their homes and helping them to prepare their house to be ready to be sold, or holding the hand of a buyer and I'm trying to understand where their furniture is going to go and if this home will suit them and their growing family. So I hope you've enjoyed my little taste of a little memory of my grandfather, bringing us up to the current days of how that has shaped me to be a gardener and a realtor.